My name is Elena Vance. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a senior portfolio risk modeler for a global climate reinsurance firm in Denver, Colorado. I was in the middle of presenting a complex capital allocation strategy to 5 members of our executive board when my phone buzzed twice against the polished mahogany of the conference table. The first message was from my mother. "We restructured the title on the Mountain House using your financial profile. You owe us $280,000 for the cost of raising you. The papers are waiting." Before my brain could even process the words, a text from my father flashed on the screen. "If you refuse to sign the final authorization by Monday, we will contact your compliance board and report you for unstable financial conduct. Don't ruin your brother's future." Then, a final text from my younger brother arrived. "Thanks for underwriting the dream, Elle. Summit Crest is finally going live!" I was seconds away from a slide that would determine whether our firm backed a $50 million underwriting syndicate. I forced my breathing to slow, stabilized my voice, and delivered the remaining 10 minutes of the presentation without a single tremor. But the moment I stepped into the empty elevator, my hands began to shake. They hadn't called to ask for a loan. They hadn't begged for help in a crisis. They had unilaterally issued a unilateral bill for my existence, using my clean credit history as their personal piggy bank. What would you do if the very people who gave you life decided that parenthood was a commercial loan they could suddenly recall? And how far would you go to protect yourself if they used your stolen identity to collect it? I didn't scream. I didn't send an angry reply. Instead, I stood in the lobby, opened a secure encrypted drive on my phone, uploaded screenshots of all 3 messages, and smiled. My mother had just committed a major financial crime, and she had been foolish enough to leave a digital paper trail. Within 2 hours, the frantic calls began. On the 5th attempt, I picked up. "What did you do?" my mother shrieked, her voice echoing through the receiver. "They just froze the transaction." She believed I had actively ruined her masterpiece. She had no idea I had only pressed a single button on my credit monitoring app. Before I tell you exactly what that button triggered, and why my entire family eventually gathered in a room expecting my total surrender, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you reading this from? I want to see how far this story travels before the truth finally catches up with them. I let my phone ring out for the rest of the evening, ignoring the voicemails that grew progressively more hostile, accusing me of being cold-hearted, transactional, and ungrateful. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, I had 17 missed calls, 3 essays disguised as text messages, and a lengthy post shared to our extended family group chat claiming that my parents were facing immediate eviction because their wealthy corporate daughter had turned her back on them. That was my mother's signature move. She never engaged with facts. She engineered an audience. Her name was Vivian Vance, and she had spent my entire childhood treating social standing as the ultimate currency. My father, Arthur, was a quiet accomplice. He rarely initiated the schemes, but he would readily validate whatever lie Vivian constructed to keep the peace. And then there was my younger brother, Julian. At 27, Julian was a professional at failing upward. He had already burnt through an artisanal coffee subscription startup, a boutique fitness app, a failed house-flipping LLC, and an online coaching program that promised to teach teenagers how to day trade. His newest venture was Summit Crest, a luxury mountain excursion and off-grid glamping business based near Aspen. He had no land leases, no commercial liability insurance, and absolutely no experience operating heavy outdoor equipment. What he did have was a glossy pitch deck, a social media account populated with stock photos of Swiss cabins, and parents who believed that his charisma was a substitute for actual competence. I called my mother back, ensuring my phone's call recording app was active. Colorado is a one-party consent state, and I wanted every word documented. "Explain what you did," I said calmly. "We used the equity in the mountain home," Vivian said, her tone shifting from rage to patronizing warmth. "The commercial lender required a cosigner with high-tier liquid assets and a stable salary. Since you have both, we listed you. It's just a formality, Elena." "Did I sign a single piece of paper?" A heavy silence hung on the line. "You signed a general financial authorization years ago." "What authorization? When?" "Family paperwork, Elena. Don't start playing lawyer with me." She sighed dramatically. "Julian already placed a non-refundable deposit on 4 luxury geodesic domes and a customized utility truck. If you don't sign the final guarantor release by Monday morning, he loses everything." When I told her flatly that I would never guarantee a nearly $300,000 high-interest commercial loan, her voice broke into a perfectly timed sob. "We fed you. We paid for your tennis lessons, your private high school tuition, your college meal plans. Do you honestly think none of that had a price tag?" The question didn't hurt me. In fact, it provided a beautiful, chilling clarity. My mother didn't view parental sacrifice as love. She viewed it as a line of credit she could call in whenever her favorite child ran out of money. "Children don't sign promissory notes for being born," I said, "and ethical parents don't forge their daughter's name to fund their son's delusions." "Watch your tongue," my father's voice suddenly cut in, having joined on the extension. "The paperwork is already processing. If you back out now, you humiliate this family. Julian deserves the same head start we gave you." I reminded him that my head start consisted of a partial academic scholarship, working 20 hours a week in the university's data lab, and living off cheap noodles while I paid off my own student loans. My father didn't hesitate. "Exactly. You know how to survive a storm. Julian doesn't." There it was. The fundamental architecture of our family system condensed into a single sentence. I was condemned to suffer because I was strong enough to bear it, while Julian was protected because the slightest consequence might shatter his fragile ego. My father then threatened to call my employer's ethics hotline to report me as financially volatile, while my mother promised to release a public statement to our church community detailing my abandonment of my family. Julian joined the line chuckling. "Come on, sis. Once the glamping site takes off, we all get rich anyway. Besides, you make 6 figures sitting behind a computer screen all day. Share the wealth." They had no idea that my entire career revolved around identifying fraudulent transaction patterns, parsing manipulated balance sheets, and discovering systemic discrepancies that people desperately hoped would remain hidden. "Send me the loan package," I told them. "I'll review the documents before Monday." My mother let out a relieved breath. Julian called me the best sister in the world. My father warned me not to show the papers to any outside parties. I hung up, routed the recorded call to my personal server, and pulled up my comprehensive credit report. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. There was a recent hard inquiry from a commercial boutique lender, a newly opened revolving credit line with a $15,000 limit, and a residential billing address registered in Fort Collins, an apartment I had never even visited. This wasn't a temporary family dispute. My family had been actively living inside my financial identity for months. The next morning, I drove north into the foothills, arriving at my parents' mountain home just after midday. The log and stone house sat on a pristine ridge overlooking the valley, but the sight of it no longer brought back warm childhood memories. My mother was waiting at the heavy oak dining table, a thick manila folder placed precisely in front of an empty chair. My father stood by the hearth, his arms crossed, while Julian leaned against the granite kitchen counter wearing a black fleece jacket with Summit crest embroidered over the chest, looking like a CEO who had never worked a day in his life. "Just sign the highlighted sections on pages 14 and 18 and we can all move past this," Vivian said. I didn't sit down. I opened the folder, pulled out my camera, and systematically took high-resolution photos of every single page. The loan application listed me as a primary guarantor and co-borrower, claiming that I held a partial ownership stake in a family trust that supposedly owned the mountain home. It displayed my exact salary, my corporate email address, an outdated bank account number, and an electronic signature dated 2 weeks prior. The signature looked close to mine, but the curvature of the E and the final cross on the V were entirely wrong. "Where did you get this signature?" I asked. My father cleared his throat. "You signed a general power of attorney and educational release when you were 21. That statement unlocked a memory I had long buried. During my senior year of college, while I was balancing finals, working 2 jobs, and sleeping 4 hours a night, my parents had sent me a fast-tracked envelope of trust updates, claiming they needed my signature to release my final semester's tuition aid. I had blindly signed the designated signature blocks without demanding the complete packet. That same winter, Julian had posted photos of himself skiing in Aspen, wearing high-end gear that cost more than my monthly rent. When I had asked how they paid for it, my father told me they found unallocated educational funds. Standing in their dining room now, the pieces clicked. They had kept those blank signature pages for over a decade, using them as master keys to open whatever financial doors they pleased. "You kept my signature on file," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We kept family archives, Vivian snapped, "and we use them to support this family." Julian rolled his eyes. "You're being incredibly dramatic, Elena. Mom and Dad aren't stealing from you. They're investing in us. The $280,000 covers the land lease deposits, the geodesic domes, the marketing campaign, and 6 months of operating capital." "Did you sign a personal guarantee, Julian?" I asked. "The lender preferred your profile," he said smoothly. "But I'm the managing partner. So you get the equity, the assets, and the revenue, while I inherit the liability if, or rather when, this business defaults." "You get family equity later," Vivian interrupted, her tone hardening. "We don't need formal contracts between blood." I placed my phone on the table and hit play. My father's voice filled the room, threatening to call my employer and sabotage my career. My mother lunged for the phone, but I snatched it back before she could touch it. "You recorded us?" she gasped, her face pale. "I documented you," I corrected. "There is a legal distinction." She immediately launched into her usual defense, listing every penny they had ever spent on me. My childhood braces, birthday parties, school supplies, a refurbished laptop when I was 15. She had a ledger for my childhood, but when I asked if she had kept a similar ledger for Julian's legal fees from his college days, his failed lease agreements, or his unpaid credit cards, she fell completely silent. "We had to take a bridge loan of $62,000 to secure the land lease," my father finally confessed, his voice dropping. "It's already been dispersed. Some went to Julian's deposits, and the rest went to urgent family debts." "What debts?" I demanded. Neither of them answered. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. "I'm taking these." My father stepped in front of the front door, blocking my exit. "Those are original financial files. They stay in this house." "I have digital scans backed up to 2 secure cloud servers," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Move out of the doorway, Dad." Julian stepped forward, his cocky demeanor slipping. "Don't ruin this for me, Elle. I'm finally building something massive. Don't let your jealousy destroy my future." "I'm not destroying your business, Julian," I said. "I'm simply removing the stolen foundation you built it on." Vivian warned me that if I walked out that door, she would tell every aunt, uncle, and cousin that I had sold out my own flesh and blood for a corporate paycheck. "Make sure you spell my name right on the post," I said, and walked out. As I started my car, my phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from the commercial lender. Someone was trying to reset my password on the client portal. A second later, a text from Julian appeared. "Sign by Monday, or you'll regret finding out what happens next." He thought the threat would scare me. Instead, it gave me exactly what I needed. Written proof that Julian was not an innocent beneficiary of our parents' scheme. He was an active, knowing participant. Instead of driving straight back to Denver, I drove 40 minutes north to Fort Collins, to a modest cottage surrounded by apple trees. This was the home of my Aunt Miriam, my mother's older sister. Miriam was the family outcast, the one who had stopped attending Thanksgiving dinners 5 years ago without offering an explanation. When I knocked on her door and explained what had happened, Miriam didn't look shocked. She looked incredibly tired. She ushered me inside, locked the door, pulled the shades, and placed a rusted metal lockbox on the kitchen table. Inside were bank transfers, court records, and a handwritten agreement dated 9 years ago. "What is this?" I asked. "When Julian was 18, he took your father's truck after a party and hit a parked sedan," Miriam said softly. "The impact pushed that car into a pedestrian, breaking both of his legs. Julian fled the scene. Your father claimed he was the one driving, and your mother paid off the victim using cash from a custodial account your grandparents had set up for both of you." I stared at the documents. My grandparents had set up a $100,000 trust fund for my college education and career start. When I graduated, my parents told me the trust had evaporated due to market downturns. "They spent your half of the trust to keep Julian out of prison," Miriam said. "And the paperwork you signed at 21 wasn't an educational release. It was a liability waiver, releasing your father as the trustee and acknowledging that you had received your full distribution." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a sudden act of financial desperation. It was a generational system. I was the designated clean engine, meant to generate capital and absorb risk, while Julian was the precious cargo, shielded from every wreck he caused. Miriam handed me a recent bank statement mailed to her house by mistake. It showed a recurring monthly payment from an account in my name to a premium credit monitoring service. "They've been monitoring your credit score for years," Miriam said, "using the Fort Collins address of one of Julian's ex-girlfriends to hide the correspondence from you." I looked at the older woman. Why didn't you tell me this years ago? Tears welled in Miriam's eyes. Your mother threatened to tell the family I was a thief and cut me off from my grandchildren. I wanted to keep the peace. Silence doesn't keep the peace, Aunt Miriam, I said. It just keeps the abuse running on schedule. On Monday morning, I met with Sarah Jenkins, a high-caliber consumer protection attorney specializing in identity theft and corporate fraud. Sarah looked over the recording, the credit reports, the forged signatures, and the text messages. We have more than enough to dismantle this, Sarah said. But we have to move quickly. We need to freeze your credit files, file an official identity theft report with the FTC, and notify the lender's fraud division. The single button I had pressed on my phone the day before was the Dispute Fraudulent Inquiry flag on my credit portal. That simple action had automatically triggered a system-wide lock on the pending $280,000 commercial loan, halting the final disbursement of funds and initiating an internal fraud investigation by the lender, Mountain State Capital. My mother's frantic phone calls had started the exact second the bank's compliance officer flagged the file and demanded live video verification from all primary signees. Sarah warned me that my family would try to frame this as an unfortunate family misunderstanding. To prevent that, we needed to prove they knew they were acting without my consent. Julian's threat and the recorded phone call were crucial, but Sarah wanted the complete digital trail. Through a formal dispute request, we obtained the IP login records for Mountain State Capital. The loan application had been submitted from my parents' home Wi-Fi network, but edited and updated multiple times from Julian's mobile device. The bank also shared the verification video my mother had uploaded to their portal, a 37-second clip of Vivian holding a photocopy of my old driver's license next to her own face, smiling warmly as she lied to the camera, claiming I was traveling abroad on business and had authorized her to sign on my behalf. Watching my mother calmly barter away my financial future on a recorded video was the final thread of family loyalty breaking. What happens to them now? I asked Sarah. The lender will remove your name from the debt, Sarah explained, but the $62,000 bridge loan has already been spent. The bank will move to recover those funds. They can foreclose on your parents' house, seize Julian's assets, or pursue criminal charges for grand larceny and bank fraud. It's up to the federal prosecutors. For the next 10 days, I went completely dark. I didn't respond to the family group chats, I didn't post online, and I didn't return Vivian's increasingly desperate texts. Instead, I sent my mother a single message. I want us to sit down for a final family dinner at Aunt Miriam's house this Friday to resolve this privately. Bring all the original documents. She took the bait instantly. Within an hour, her public Facebook post went from painting me as an ungrateful daughter to praising the, quote, power of unconditional family forgiveness. Julian texted me, offering me a 5% stake in Summit Crest if I signed the papers at dinner. When I didn't reply, he raised it to 10%, adding that the geodesic domes were sitting on a shipping dock, and any further delay was costing him $1,500 a day in storage fees. Sarah, my attorney, told me to keep him talking. I requested the invoices, the business plans, and the asset receipts. Julian sent over a digital folder of chaotic spreadsheets, plagiarized marketing materials, and purchase orders from an equipment dealer in Washington. One invoice showed that $27,000 of the stolen bridge loan had been paid as a deposit on the domes. Another $18,000 had been transferred directly to a branding agency owned by one of Julian's fraternity brothers. The remaining $17,000 of the urgent family debt had been withdrawn in cash at a casino near Blackhawk, with another $9,000 deposited into Julian's personal day trading account. He had spent the fresh start before the business even had a physical address. Meanwhile, Sarah's private investigator discovered that my parents had tried to secure 2 other loans using my Social Security number over the past 18 months. One had been rejected because the forged pay stub didn't match my employer's corporate format. The second had been withdrawn when the bank insisted on a phone verification. This wasn't a desperate, one-time mistake. It was an ongoing corporate operation, and my mother had simply kept trying doors until one opened. But the most damaging blow was professional. Because I worked with high-level risk modeling and sensitive financial data, my firm's background monitoring system flagged the sudden influx of fraudulent inquiries and the new address on my profile. My promotion to Director of Global Risk was put on an administrative hold pending a compliance review. My family's greed had finally crossed into the career I had built with my own sweat and sleepless nights. The dinner at Aunt Miriam's house was set for Friday at 7 p.m. My mother arrived carrying a homemade peach cobbler, dressed as if we were celebrating a promotion rather than addressing a felony. My father carried a portable document scanner, and Julian arrived 15 minutes late, parking his rented luxury SUV in Miriam's driveway while wearing his Summit Crest jacket. They had brought my Uncle Martin and Cousin Paige to act as witnesses to my reconciliation. They also brought Leonard, my parents' longtime family accountant, believing his presence would pressure me into compliance. Sarah sat next to me, introduced simply as my financial consultant. Thomas Croft, the lead fraud investigator for Mountain State Capital, was sitting quietly in Miriam's back study, watching the entire room through the home's smart security system. We sat through 11 minutes of strained small talk before my mother slid the thick leather folder across the table. "Sign the highlighted sections, sweetie, and we can put this entire nightmare behind us." I opened the folder. The new document was even more predatory than the first. It not only confirmed the $280,000 loan, but it also contained a retroactive clause waiving my right to dispute any past transactions, gave them ongoing access to my credit profile, and opened a corporate line of credit for Summit Crest under my name. They weren't asking for a truce. They were asking me to legalize their past crimes and fund their future ones. I looked up at Leonard, the accountant. "Leonard, did your office prepare the verified income statement attached to this application?" Leonard adjusted his glasses, looked at the document, and frowned. "Absolutely not. This isn't our letterhead, and these numbers don't match the tax returns we filed for your parents." "That's impossible, Leonard," my father said, his voice rising. "You must have misplaced the file." Sarah placed a printout of the digital application on the table. "The metadata shows this income statement was edited and uploaded from Julian Vance's mobile device on October 14th. Julian's face flushed a deep crimson. "Everyone in the house uses my phone. This doesn't prove anything." I tapped my phone screen, playing the recording from our call. "Of course I knew. It was my business plan." Julian lunged across the table to grab my phone, but Uncle Martin stood up and pushed him back into his seat. "What is going on here, Arthur?" Martin demanded, looking at my father. Before my father could speak, Thomas Croft stepped out of the back study, flashing his corporate credential. "My name is Thomas Croft, and I am the head of asset protection for Mountain State Capital," he announced. "This loan application has been officially classified as active identity fraud. The pending funds are permanently canceled, and our legal team is demanding immediate repayment of the $62,000 bridge loan. If the funds are not returned by Monday, we will initiate foreclosure proceedings on the Mountain home and hand this file over to the state attorney general." The room erupted. My mother stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and venom. "What have you done to this family?" "I took my name off your crimes," I said. Sarah handed my parents the formal identity theft affidavits, cease and desist orders, and a notification of civil litigation. Julian received a separate packet naming him and Summit Crest in a federal asset freeze petition. My mother turned to Uncle Martin and Paige, her voice cracking. "She's lying! She promised she would help us!" But Cousin Paige was looking at her phone. "Aunt Vivian, you posted on Facebook that Elena was abandoning you because she was selfish, but these texts Miriam just showed us say you planned to forge her signature before she even knew about the loan." The unified front collapsed instantly. My father began shouting at Julian for ruining the family's safety. Julian screamed at my mother for keeping old signature files, and my mother sobbed, accusing my father of failing to protect them. Julian glared at me, his fists clenched. "You just ruined my life. This was my only real chance." "You've had 5 chances, Julian," I said, standing up. "What you've never had are consequences." He threatened to destroy my reputation, but Sarah stepped in, reminding him that threatening an active federal fraud victim carried an immediate escalation of charges. Thomas Croft then informed Julian that the luxury SUV parked in the driveway, rented using the fraudulent credit line, was scheduled for immediate repossession. Julian went entirely pale, turning to our father. "Dad, we have to go. Do something." But my father just sat there, his head in his hands. "With what money, Julian? We don't have a house anymore." My mother let out a final, desperate scream. "I was only trying to save my son." "You have 2 children, Mom," I said, looking down at her. "You simply decided only one of us was worth saving." Even then, as the walls crumbled around her, Vivian looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "If you just sign a smaller guarantee, just $50,000, the bank will call off the investigation. Please, Elena, for your mother." That was the final confirmation. She didn't care about the truth, and she didn't care about my career. She simply believed that her motherhood gave her an eternal license to exploit me. "The dinner is over," I said. The fallout was swift and absolute. With the fraudulent guarantee removed, Mountain State Capital withdrew the loan and demanded immediate satisfaction of the bridge debt. Because my parents had already depleted the home's equity to fund Julian's past failures, they couldn't pay. The mountain home was sold under a bank-supervised liquidation. After the liens, fees, and unpaid taxes were settled, my parents were left with less than $12,000. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom rental duplex in Colorado Springs. My father now works seasonal shifts at an Amazon fulfillment center, and my mother sells secondhand clothes and household items on online marketplaces. Julian's Summit Crest collapsed before a single tent was pitched. The equipment dealers seized the geodesic domes, retaining the deposit as a cancellation fee. His day trading account was liquidated, and his former branding agency sued him for breach of contract. Facing massive personal liability and allegations of mixing business funds with personal expenditures, Julian was forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. For years, he had called his failures fresh starts. The federal court forced him to call it a permanent record. My corporate compliance review was cleared within 3 weeks. With the official fraud reports and police filings in hand, my firm's board fully exonerated me. I was promoted to Director of Global Risk, managing a team of 25 analysts across 3 countries. My mother still tries to reach me from burner numbers. Her messages cycle through a predictable rotation of rage, guilt, and bargaining. "You took away our retirement," she wrote last month. Then came a photo of me as a toddler. "Remember when we were a family? You owe us your love." Finally, "We won't ask for any more loans if you just pay our security deposit on the new apartment." I forward every single message to Sarah and delete them from my phone. My father sent a handwritten letter claiming he was forced to go along with my mother's plans to keep her happy. He asked for my forgiveness. But I remembered him standing in front of the door, blocking my exit and threatening my career. His silence wasn't innocence. It was a calculated business decision. I didn't reply. Aunt Miriam and I spend our holidays together now. She no longer calls silence peace. She tells our younger cousins that keeping family secrets only protects the abuser, never the victim. Last week, during a presentation to my new risk management team, I projected a slide showing how minor, unchecked anomalies eventually lead to total structural failure. Halfway through the lecture, I realized that my family's collapse didn't begin with a $280,000 loan. It began 15 years ago, every time my parents erased Julian's boundaries and rebranded my obedience as loyalty. It grew every time I accepted the role of the responsible daughter as a lifetime debt contract. By the time they forged my signature, they didn't think they were crossing a line. They honestly believed no line existed. That is the lesson I carry with me now. Blood does not grant unlimited access to your life. Raising a child is not an investment portfolio. Love does not carry a balance sheet, and loyalty does not require you to set your own future on fire to keep someone else warm. Boundaries will always look like cruelty to the people who benefited from your lack of them, but their anger doesn't make your boundary wrong. True financial freedom isn't just about the numbers in your bank account. It's knowing that your name, your identity, and your labor belong solely to you. And emotional freedom is accepting that some people will call you selfish the exact moment you stop letting them exploit you. I didn't save my parents' house, my brother's company, or the fragile illusion of our family. I saved the only person they expected me to sacrifice. So tell me honestly, if your own family forged your name, threatened your livelihood, and gambled away your future for the sibling they always protected, would you ever look back? Or would you close the door forever?